Good afternoon, and thanks very much for joining us. This weekend, we celebrate Labor Day 2020, and I want to take this opportunity to thank all of America's workers in the private sector as well as the public sector for what you do. You know as well as I do that it is your work which makes our economy go, not Wall Street stockbrokers, not real estate speculators, not hedge fund managers, not billionaires who clip coupons. It is you who provide the goods and services, the food and the health care, the education and the transportation that we need. Thank you for what you do. And I want to give a special acknowledgement in the midst of this horrific pandemic to all of the essential workers who quite literally are putting their lives on the line to provide the basic services that we rely on. Let us not forget for a moment that thousands of those workers have made the ultimate sacrifice in serving their fellow Americans. Whether they were in the medical profession, in public transportation, in meatpacking, in grocery stores, in the postal service, in police and fire departments, in EMT services, and in many, many other areas. Let us say to their families, thank you so much, and we appreciate the sacrifice that they made. Today, Labor Day weekend, is not only a time to thank workers, but it is also a time to reflect on how the working class of this country is doing and where we want to be in the future. As to where we are today, well, you don't need me to tell you. You are living it. The situation was bad before the pandemic and the economic meltdown. It is far worse now. In fact, we are living through the worst economic moment since the Great Depression. Today, as a result of the pandemic and economic meltdown, tens of millions of workers have lost their jobs and their incomes. As we speak, many of our families are struggling to put food on the table and feed their kids. Emergency food shelves all across this country have seen an unprecedented level of demand. This is America. People should not be going hungry. And in America today, because we do not guarantee health care as a human right, when you lose your job, you lose your health care. Today, over 90 million Americans are either uninsured or underinsured. That means they cannot go to a doctor when they get sick. Yes, in the richest country in the history of the world, many thousands of our fellow Americans will die unnecessarily this year because they lack health care, and many others will face bankruptcy because of their outrageously high medical and prescription drug bills. Today, in America, millions of families are worried about being evicted from their apartments or losing their homes. Yes, in the midst of the worst public health crisis in 100 years, people are worried about where they're going to be sleeping next week or next month. How outrageous, how frightening is that? Clearly, in the midst of this unprecedented time, the United States Congress must act and act now. It cannot continue to turn its back on the working families of this country because the suffering is just too great. Now, the good news is that the U.S. House of Representatives has done its job, and I thank them for that. The very bad news is that the Republican-controlled Senate has done nothing. The HEROES Act, passed by the House in May, over 3 months ago, would extend the $600 a week increase in unemployment benefits that workers received from the CARES Act. This is absolutely essential. It would give families during this crisis the income they need to live with dignity. That legislation would also provide every working class American with another $1,200 stimulus check. It would provide $175 billion in rental and mortgage assistance to help people pay their rent and mortgages. It would provide nutrition assistance so that millions of senior citizens, people with disabilities, and children do not go hungry. It would provide over $900 billion to state and local governments to prevent the massive layoff of teachers, firefighters, nurses, and construction workers. It would provide hazard pay to essential workers. Yes, we honor those who put their lives on the line to serve us. We should adequately compensate them as well. That legislation would provide health care for those who lost their jobs. And it would also provide vital funding for election security and for the United States Postal Service. We must make certain that the people of our country can vote without risking their health or their lives. Today, I say to the Republican leader of the United States Senate, Mitch McConnell, do your job. Let us pass the HEROES Act or legislation that is even better. But for once in your life, stop worrying about your billionaire campaign contributors and respond to the needs of working families. But when we talk about the needs of working families, let us understand that if the truth be known, workers have faced an enormous economic crisis before the pandemic, a crisis which has gone on for many, many decades. When we talk about the economy, we have got to appreciate what it means, morally and economically, that our country has more income and wealth inequality today than at any time since the 1920s. When 3 people own more wealth than the bottom half of our country, when the top 1% owns more wealth than the bottom 92%, and when 45% of all new income goes to the top 1%. We need to understand what kind of economic policies have been created such that over the last 30 years, the top 1% have seen a $22 trillion increase in their wealth, while the bottom half of the American people have actually seen a decline in their wealth. Let me repeat that. The top 1% have seen a $22 trillion increase in their wealth over the last 30 years, while the bottom half of the American people have actually seen a decline in their wealth. We need to know why, despite a huge increase in productivity and an explosion in technology, the average American worker today makes no more than he or she did 50 years ago in real inflation accounted for wages. We need to know why most of the new jobs being created today are low-wage, low-skill jobs, and they are often part-time. We need to know why over 500,000 Americans are homeless and 18 million families are spending more than half of their incomes on housing. We are the richest country in the history of the world, but 40% of older workers have no savings for retirement. Millions of seniors have barely enough to stay alive, and 45 million of our people are living in poverty. Let me be as clear as I can be. The agenda that we as progressives are fighting for is the agenda of the American working class. It is the agenda that has the courage to take on the 1% and the powerful special interests who have so much power over the economic and political life of our country. It is an agenda that demands that we will end the growing crisis of oligarchy, of income and wealth inequality, and of a corrupt political system where billionaires buy elections. It is an agenda that raises the minimum wage to a living wage of at least $15 an hour, giving 40 million people in this country a pay raise. It is an agenda that understands we cannot stop there, that we must guarantee that if workers want to form a union, they have the right to do so. And we must make certain that in the year 2020, women receive equal pay for equal work. 75 cents on the dollar is just not good enough. It is an agenda that guarantees that parents and their kids have access to universal, high quality, and affordable childcare. And that young people know that they can get the higher education they need, because we will make public colleges and universities tuition free, and we will cancel all student debt. And as the pandemic has made absolutely clear, we need to guarantee health care to all of our people as a human right, not a jobs benefit, through a Medicare for all single-payer program. Our agenda understands that we must have comprehensive immigration reform and a path towards citizenship for the 11 million undocumented in this country, and that we must bring about fundamental reform to a broken and racist criminal justice system. And that, to my mind, includes legalizing marijuana, eliminating private prisons and detention centers, ending cash bail, and totally rethinking the nature of policing in our country. This is an economic agenda that we have made significant progress proposing, and that we must and will keep fighting for. That is our agenda, and we're proud of it. Now, it is not a great secret that Joe Biden and I disagree on a number of issues. That's the simple fact. But I am happy to tell you that the economic proposals that Joe has brought forth will significantly help the working families of our country. And I think some of these proposals have just not gotten the kind of discussion that they need. So I want to say a word about them. When Joe Biden is president, and he will become president, he will increase the federal minimum wage from a starvation wage of $7.25 an hour to a living wage of $15 an hour. What Joe understands, what you understand, and what I understand is that if you work 40 hours a week in this country, you should not be living in poverty. A job in America should lift you out of poverty, not keep you in it. And let's be clear, when we increase that minimum wage to $15 an hour, we will be raising the wages of more than 40 million American workers. As a former candidate for President of the United States, traveling throughout this country, I met a single mom in Iowa who was trying to raise her child on $8 an hour. I think we all understand that no one in America can make it on $8 an hour, or $10 an hour, or $12 an hour. They need at least $15 an hour. And Joe Biden also understands that we have to guarantee that every woman in this country gets equal pay for equal work. Joe Biden also knows that if we're going to expand the middle class in America, we must make it easier for workers to join unions, engage in collective bargaining, and end the heavy-handed corporate tactics that make it hard for workers to unionize in our country. When Joe is president, when a majority of workers in a bargaining unit sign a card in support of joining a union, they will have a union. And that's a big deal. And I thank Joe for supporting that proposition. And I'll tell you what else Joe Biden understands. Like most of us, he is embarrassed that the United States is the only major nation on earth not to guarantee paid medical and family leave. When a woman in this country gives birth, She should not be forced to go back to work after 1 or 2 weeks. When a kid gets sick, mom or dad should be able to stay home and not lose a day's pay. That's why Joe has proposed at least 12 weeks of paid family and medical leave for working families. And when we talk about children and babies, we all know that our current child care system is totally inadequate. Our children and their parents deserve high quality, reliable, and affordable child care. And that is why Joe has proposed universal pre-K education for every 3- and 4-year-old in America. And when we talk about making sure that we have the best educated workforce in the world, Joe Biden understands that we need to make public colleges, universities, and trade schools tuition-free for working families, and that we need to substantially reduce student debt. Joe understands that we have got to make sure that every working-class person in America can get a higher education without going deeply into debt. And here's something else that Joe Biden knows, and that is that in the midst of the worst economic crisis in our lifetimes, we need to create millions of good-paying jobs through a massive investment in rebuilding our crumbling infrastructure, our roads, bridges, sidewalks, schools, water systems, and affordable housing. Now, some of you may recall, early on in my presidential campaign, I traveled to Canada with a group of diabetics to buy insulin, a life and death drug for more than 30 million Americans. And here's what we found. You can buy insulin in Canada, a few miles from our border, bordering on our country, for 1/10 the price that it is sold here in the United States. No, you didn't hear me incorrectly. The same product made by the same company is sold for 1/10 the price that it is sold here. But it's not just Canada, and it's not just insulin. While the drug companies, through their collusion, price fixing, and greed, make obscene profits, we pay by far the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Joe Biden understands that we must take on the pharmaceutical industry and significantly lower drug prices in America. We cannot continue paying the highest prices in the world for the medicine we need. Now, as many of you know, the United States is the only major country on earth not to guarantee health care to all of its people. Meanwhile, despite paying almost twice as much per capita for health care as the people of other countries do, over 90 million Americans are uninsured or underinsured, and over 500,000 people go bankrupt because they cannot afford their medical bills. While Joe Biden and I disagree on the best path to get universal coverage, I know that Joe will greatly expand access to health care and make it more affordable for tens of millions across this country. He will lower the eligibility age of Medicare from 65 to 60 and will expand Medicare to cover dental care, eyeglasses, and hearing aids. And he will substantially increase funding for community health centers to make sure that millions of Americans get the primary health care and the mental health care and the dental care that they desperately need. My friends, today we have a president of the United States in an outrageous, un-American way, who is trying to divide us up based on the color of our skin or where we were born or our sexual orientation or our religion. That is what Donald Trump is trying to do. What we have got to do is to stand together, to tell Trump that he will not get away with trying to divide us up, that we will stand together, black and white, Latino, Native American, Asian American, gay and straight, those of us born in the United States, those of us who are immigrants, that we are going to stand together, that we are going to take on powerful special interest, and that together we're going to create an economy that works for all of us, not just the few. Brothers and sisters, have a great Labor Day. Thank you very much.